Welcome to the deep dive. You're here because you need to cut through the noise and understand something crucial fast. Today, that something is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC, specifically for the defense industrial base.
Right.
Think of this as your shortcut to getting a real grip on what this all means.
Exactly. Our goal in this deep dive is to take you through the journey of CMMC,
Mhm.
from its initial form, version 1.0, to the, well, significant changes in 2.0. And most importantly, to give you a clear understanding of how this impacts your organization if you're working within the defense ecosystem.
Mhm.
We're drawing on an expert overview from SMPL-C. Today, they're a platform designed to streamline CMMC compliance to help us unpack this.
All right, so before we dive into the current landscape with CMMC 2.0, let's rewind a bit. Let's understand where it all started. What was the core idea behind the original CMMC 1.0?
Well, the fundamental purpose of CMMC 1.0 was really to bring a consistent cybersecurity standard across the entire defense industrial base, the DIB. It was all about better safeguarding sensitive unclassified information, specifically federal contract information, FCI, and controlled unclassified information, or CUI.
Right, CUI. Hear that a lot.
Yeah, and this is a pretty significant shift because it moved away from a system where defense contractors largely just attested to their own security measures. Self-reporting,
They just said, yeah, we're secure.
pretty much.
Hmm.
CMMC 1.0 introduced the need for actual verification that those practices were in place and, crucially, effective.
And what was the urgency behind this move towards more rigorous verification? What were the key drivers?
You really have to look at the cyber threat environment at the time. It was evolving rapidly.
Hmm.
Attacks targeting the defense supply chain were becoming more frequent, more sophisticated. It became clear that smaller businesses within the DIB could be exploited as weaker links.
Ah, the supply chain vulnerability.
Exactly, providing access to larger contractors and sensitive data.
Hmm.
Imagine like a seemingly minor vendor being the entry point for a major system compromise.
Yeah, that's scary.
The SolarWinds breach back in 2020 really highlighted how these risks can cascade, didn't it?
Mm.
An attack on one software supplier had these widespread serious consequences.
Right. Huge impact.
And with the DoD relying on, what, over 220,000 contractors, many of whom are small to medium-sized businesses?
Yeah.
Well, securing this entire network was, and still is, a critical matter of national security.
Okay, that really clarifies the why behind CMMC 1.0. So in practice, what did this original framework actually look like? What were its main components?
So CMMC 1.0 was structured around 5 distinct maturity levels, each one representing an increasing degree of cybersecurity sophistication.
5 levels, okay.
Level 1, known as basic cyber hygiene, required implementing 17 specific security practices. These were drawn from the Federal Acquisition Regulation, the FAR, specifically Clause 52.20421.
Okay, 17 practices.
And this level was designed for companies handling only FCI, federal contract information, and importantly, it allowed for self-assessment.
So that initial level sounds relatively straightforward, at least in terms of demonstrating compliance. What about the next levels?
Well, level 2 was intended as a transitional stage. It incorporated 55 security practices, some of which aligned with controls from NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, specifically Special Publication 800-171.
Okay, ramping up a bit.
Then Level 3 marked a significant step up. It mandated full compliance with all 110 security controls, outlined in NIST 800-171.
All 110.
Wow. Yeah. And crucially, this level required a third-party assessment for verification,
Yeah.
because it was aimed at organizations handling CUI, that controlled unclassified information.
Got it. So external validation became key there. And
Yeah.
then the top tiers, even more stringent, I assume.
Exactly. Levels 4 and 5 were designed for organizations dealing with higher risk environments and the most sensitive types of information. These levels included over 130 cybersecurity controls, building on that NIST 800-171 foundation, but adding more advanced and progressive practices. And similar to Level 3, these also required independent third-party assessments. It's also really important to remember, CMMC 1.0 wasn't just about the technical controls.
Oh.
It also included requirements related to the maturity of your cybersecurity processes, establishing formal policies, creating comprehensive security plans. The idea was to foster a more holistic, sustainable security posture, not just a checklist.
That definitely sounds comprehensive. Maybe. Bordering on overwhelming, perhaps. Our source material from SMPL-C mentions some significant pushback, especially from smaller businesses. What were the primary pain points with 1.0?
You're spot on. While the intention behind CMMC 1.0 was sound, the implementation, well, it ran into considerable headwinds. particularly from the small and medium-sized businesses.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The complexity of navigating 5 different levels, the lack of clear guidance on demonstrating those required maturity processes, and just the sheer volume of documentation expected. These were major sources of concern.
Documentation is always a killer.
Always. And furthermore, the costs associated with achieving some of the higher levels and undergoing those mandatory third-party assessments, that presented a significant financial burden for many smaller contractors.
Right, the assessment cost itself.
Exactly. The fact that the DoD received over 850 public comments by March 2021 really underscores the depth and breadth of these challenges. It suggested that, while security was paramount, the initial approach might have unintentionally created barriers for a big chunk of the defense industrial base.
Okay, so there was a clear recognition that CMMC 1.0, aiming for robust security, might have been too cumbersome, especially for those smaller players vital to the supply chain. This brings us to the transition to CMMC 2.0. What were the key factors that triggered this big shift?
The overwhelming feedback from the industry was the primary catalyst. Like we discussed, businesses, especially smaller ones, voiced strong concerns. Too many levels, unclear processes, potentially prohibitive costs.
Right, they listened.
They did. This widespread feedback prompted the Department of Defense to conduct an internal review of the whole CMMC 1.0 framework. And the direct result of that review was the announcement of CMMC 2.0 in November 2021.
Okay, November 21.
The fundamental aim was to develop a more streamlined, more adaptable approach to cybersecurity for the DIB, but importantly, without sacrificing those core security objectives. The DoD recognized the need for a framework that was both effective, protecting sensitive information, and feasible for a wide range of organizations to actually implement.
So CMMC 2.0 was basically designed to be more practical, more accessible, while still keeping that strong security focus. What were the main objectives behind this redesign?
Precisely. The core objectives of 2.0 revolved around 3 key principles: simplicity, affordability, and a closer alignment with existing, well-established NIST standards.
Simplicity, affordability, NIST alignment. Got it.
The goal was to reduce the overall complexity, lower the financial and administrative overhead associated with compliance, and make it easier for organizations to understand and implement the necessary controls by more directly leveraging those widely recognized NIST guidelines. It was a direct response to the industry's call for a more pragmatic, less burdensome approach.
And how did they actually achieve these objectives? What are the most significant changes that came with CMMC 2.0?
Well, the most immediate and noticeable change is the simplification of the maturity levels. CMMC 2.0 reduced the number of levels from the original 5 down to just 3.
5 down to 3. Okay, that's a big difference.
Yeah, that streamlining alone makes the whole landscape much easier to navigate. Let's break down what these new levels entail.
Please do. Give us the rundown on the new structure.
Okay, at the foundational level, we now have CMMC Level 1, termed foundational. This level focuses on protecting federal contract information, FCI. It requires implementing 15 specific security controls. Again, outline that FR clause, 52.20421.
15 controls now, down from 17.
15, yes. And a key aspect of Level 1 is that compliance can be demonstrated through an annual self-assessment. No requirement for an external third-party audit.
Self-assessment. That's huge for small businesses.
Absolutely. It significantly reduces the burden for companies handling only FCI.
That sounds like a much more manageable starting point. What about the next level up?
The next level is CMMC Level 2, now called Advanced. This level is designed for organizations handling CUI, Controlled Unclassified Information. It requires implementing all 110 security controls from NIST SP 800-171.
Okay, the full 110 NIST controls again.
Yes, but here's where we see a bit of nuance. For contracts that the DoD deems non-prioritized regarding CUI, organizations can conduct a self-assessment.
Oh, interesting. Self-assessment even for CUI sometimes.
Sometimes. However, for contracts considered prioritized, maybe due to the sensitivity or criticality of the CUI involved, a third-party assessment by a certified CMMC third-party assessment organization, a C3PO, is still mandatory.
C3PAO. Got it.
Right. And it's important to note, both types of assessments at Level 2 are valid for 3 years. This tiered approach at Level 2 aims to balance security needs with resources and potential impact on different contract types.
Okay, so a more risk-based approach at Level 2. Assessment level depends on CUI sensitivity. Makes sense. And the highest tier in 2.0?
The highest level is CMMC Level 3, Designated Expert. This level builds upon that robust security foundation of Level 2 by adding 24 additional more stringent security controls from NIST Special Publication 800-172.
800-172. Okay, another NIST standard.
Yep. This level is intended for organizations handling the most critical and sensitive types of CUI. Assessments for Level 3 are conducted by the Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity Assessment Center, or DIBCCAC.
DIBC cut, not a C3PO.
Correct, DIBCCAC for Level 3. And these assessments are required every 3 years. This ensures the highest level of scrutiny for those entrusted with the most sensitive defense information.
So a much simpler three-tiered structure compared to the original 5. The SMPL-C overview also mentions a reduction in specific requirements beyond just the number of levels. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, another significant simplification in CMMC 2.0 was eliminating the CMMC unique security practices and those maturity process requirements that were part of 1.0.
Ah, the extra stuff on top of NIST.
Exactly. Under the original framework, Level 2, for example, included over 20 extra cybersecurity practices in addition to the 110 NIST controls. Those additional CMC-specific practices, they've been removed in 2.0.
Okay.
Now, Level 2, the security requirements directly mirror the 110 controls of NIST 800-171, period.
Much cleaner.
Much cleaner. It means organizations no longer need to worry about adhering to a separate set of CMMC-specific practices or, the extensive documentation associated with demonstrating the maturity of their processes beyond just implementing the NIST controls. This was a direct response to that significant feedback about excessive burden, particularly on SMBs who struggled to understand and implement those extras.
That sounds like it would definitely reduce a significant amount of complexity and paperwork. What about the assessment process itself? We touched on self-assessments earlier.
That's right. CMMC 2.0 introduced a more flexible approach. As we said, Level 1 and certain non-prioritized Level 2 contracts now allow for self-assessments. This is a notable shift from 1.0, which initially envisioned much greater third-party assessments. For these self-assessments, contractors are required to submit their assessment results, along with an annual affirmation of compliance, into the Supplier Performance Risk System, or SPRS.
SPRS. Okay. Need to know that acronym.
Yep. This offers a less costly and less resource-intensive pathway for many organizations. However, it's critical to reiterate, for prioritized Level 2 contracts and all Level 3 contracts, independent third-party assessments by certified C3PAOs, or the DIBCCAC, remain mandatory.
Still got to have that independent check for the sensitive stuff.
Absolutely. This ensures rigorous, independent verification for those handling more sensitive and critical information. This balance between self-assessment and third-party validation aims to provide both flexibility and accountability within the framework.
So CMMC 2.0 really seems to be trying to find that better balance, balancing critical cybersecurity needs with the practical realities of implementation, especially for smaller businesses in the DIB.
Exactly.
Let's delve into the specific impact then. How does CMMC 2.0 directly address the concerns and challenges faced by those small businesses?
Well, for small and medium-sized businesses, SMBs CMMC 2.0 offers several key advantages. The reduction in levels simplifies figuring out the requirements for their specific situation.
Less confusion.
Right. The option for self-assessments at Level 1 and some Level 2 contracts can significantly lower the financial burden compared to mandatory third-party audits.
Big cost saving, potentially.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the introduction of plans of action and milestones, or POANMs.
POAMs, okay.
This provides a degree of flexibility. It allows organizations to achieve certification even if they have minor identified security gaps, as long as they have a documented plan and are actively working to remediate them.
So you don't have to be perfect on day one.
Not necessarily perfect, but you need a solid plan to get there. However, it's important to be realistic. SMBs will likely still face challenges.
Like what?
Limited internal staff with specialized cyber expertise, existing IT infrastructure might need significant upgrades to meet controls, and just the task of creating and maintaining the necessary security documentation can still be a considerable undertaking.
Yeah, documentation again.
Always. So while 2.0 is more accommodating, it doesn't eliminate the need for investment and effort in improving cybersecurity.
Absolutely. Even with a streamlined framework, there's still work to do. What about the timeline? When do these CMMC 2.0 requirements actually take effect for contractors?
Okay, timeline. The final CMMC 2.0 rule, that's Title 32 of the Code of Federal Regulations, officially went into effect December 16, 2024.
Okay, so it's live now.
It is. And importantly, Level 2 assessments began immediately following that effective date. Looking ahead, the Department of Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, the DFARS rule, that's currently anticipated in Q2 2025.
DFARS rule Q2 25, and that's the trigger.
That's the big trigger. It will formally kick off a 3-year phased rollout of CMMC requirements within DoD contracts.
3-year rollout.
Yeah. The current expectation is that by 2028, all new DoD contracts will include a specific CMMC requirement as a condition of award.
By 2028, it's basically mandatory for new contracts.
That's the plan. And it's crucial for organizations to factor in the time it takes to actually achieve certification. The process itself can range from, say, 6 to 12 months. Depends on your current posture, the level you're aiming for.
6 to 12 months just for the process.
Easily. So proactive preparation isn't just advisable, it's becoming essential. You can't wait until the last minute.
So, even though 2028 might seem a way off, for many DIB businesses, starting now is absolutely critical to avoid disruptions. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Talk about the money. What are the typical cost considerations for CMMC 2.0 compliance?
Right, the cost. While self-assessments at certain levels will undoubtedly help reduce costs for some, especially at level 1, it's important to understand that achieving compliance at the higher levels, particularly those needing mandatory third-party assessments, can still involve significant financial investments.
Yeah, those C3PAO audits aren't free.
Definitely not. The costs include the fees charged by C3PAOs or DIB-CCAG for the assessments themselves, plus the internal costs for remediation, fixing vulnerabilities, implementing necessary controls.
Remediation can be expensive.
It can. Estimates for these higher-level assessments and the related remediation efforts can range pretty widely, maybe $20,000 to well over $100,000.
Wow, quite a range.
Yeah, it depends on the organization's size, complexity, how mature their security program already is, how much improvement is needed. But, and this is crucial, businesses have to weigh these costs against the alternative,
Which is?
the significant risk of losing out on future DoD contracts due to non-compliance. That potential loss of revenue, it could have far greater, longer-lasting financial implications than the cost of getting certified.
That really puts the cost of compliance into perspective. The cost of non-compliance could be much higher.
Exactly. It's an investment in future business.
So for a company listening right now, wanting to get on the right track, what are the immediate actionable steps they should be taking to work towards and maintain compliance with CMMC 2.0?
Okay, first step. Conduct a thorough assessment of your current cybersecurity posture against the specific requirements of the CMMC level relevant to you. Know where you stand.
Gap analysis, basically.
Precisely. Once you understand your current state, you need a comprehensive plan. This usually means creating a system security plan, an SSP, detailing how you're implementing the required controls, and a plan of action and milestones, the POA&M we mentioned, outlining any gaps and your detailed plan for fixing them with timelines.
Okay, SSP and POA&M. Plan the work.
Then, the critical step. Actually implement the security controls. Address the vulnerabilities you found. Work the plan.
Work the plan.
And throughout this entire process, meticulously document everything you do. This documentation is crucial evidence for audits or assessments.
Document, document, document.
You got it. Finally, remember, CMMC compliance isn't a one-time thing. It requires continuous monitoring, ongoing maintenance of your security controls. You need to stay compliant as requirements evolve and threats change. It's a continuous process.
Those are really practical, actionable steps. The SMPL-C overview also highlights some common challenges organizations face. What are some typical hurdles and maybe some potential solutions?
Yeah, common challenges. One of the biggest, especially for SMBs, is limited resources, both money and people with the right cybersecurity expertise.
Right, the skills gap.
Yeah. One potential solution is to explore automation, automating documentation, gap tracking that can free up valuable time and reduce reliance on manual effort. Tools can help.
Use technology to help manage the tech requirements.
Makes sense, right? Technical complexity is another hurdle. The language in NIST 800-171 can be dense, difficult to interpret and implement correctly if you're not deep in cyber.
Yeah, it's not exactly light reading.
Not at all. So seeking clear, prescriptive guidance is often key, maybe from experienced consultants or platforms that offer step-by-step instructions tailored to your environment.
Get some help translating the requirements.
Exactly. Another common challenge, getting buy-in from all levels of staff, making sure everyone understands why cyber matters and what their role is.
Security is everyone's job, right?
It has to be. Centralized training programs, clear communication about the benefits of CMMC, not just the burden, can help address this. And lastly, just keeping pace.
Keeping up with changes.
Yeah. The threat landscape evolves constantly. Regulations change, like the upcoming NIST 821 Revision 3, expected maybe 2026, 2027. Organizations need ongoing vigilance, staying informed, proactively adapting.
So it's a moving target.
Always.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. Really cleared up a lot about CMMC's evolution and what 2.0 means for businesses and the DIB. To bring it all together, could you summarize the key takeaways for our listeners grappling with CMMC 2.0?
Certainly. We've seen a clear evolution, haven't we, from CMMC 1.0's initial framework to the more adaptable, more pragmatic approach of 2.0, the central theme of this shift. A deliberate effort to balance the critical need for strong cybersecurity in the DIB with the practical realities and varying capabilities of organizations, especially those SMBs vital to the supply chain.
Balancing security and feasibility.
Exactly. The key changes: streamlined levels, reduced unique requirements, self-assessment options for lower risks. They're all intended to make compliance more feasible for more organizations while still upholding that strong commitment to protecting sensitive defense info. CMMC 2.0 is aiming for a more targeted and hopefully more effective approach.
So, with all this information in mind, what's one final thought you'd leave our listeners with as they navigate this ever-evolving landscape of CMMC and defense cybersecurity?
Well, looking forward, it's clear the cybersecurity landscape isn't going to stand still. It'll continue its rapid evolution. As threats get more sophisticated, think AI-driven attacks, complex supply chain vulnerabilities.
The next generation of threats.
Right. We can reasonably anticipate the CMMC framework itself will also need to adapt further, maybe integrating new standards for cloud, maybe even quantum security down the line. Who knows?
Wow, quantum.
It's out there. So the real challenge for organizations like yours isn't just achieving CMMC compliance today. It's about cultivating a resilient, adaptable cybersecurity posture that can continuously evolve alongside these emerging threats.
Building for the future, not just the present.
Exactly. So take time now to consider not only how you'll meet the current CMMC 2.0 requirements, but how you can build a fundamental security foundation that lets you navigate tomorrow's cyber challenges well beyond just checking compliance boxes.
A provocative thought indeed. What questions does this raise for you, listening now, about your organization's long-term cybersecurity strategy? Something to mull over.
Definitely something to think about.